Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, we're continuing the discussion that we started 2 weeks ago on the 4 common leadership problems and their solutions article by Sam Adeyemi. We posted the article in the podcast description for the last 2 weeks. On this episode, we're going to talk about the third of the 4 items in that article when it comes to the problems that leaders have a responsibility to solve when they're happening on their teams. This particular issue that we're going to talk about today is when your team is playing politics. And I think this is different than the previous two. The last week we talked about when your team is consumed by negativity. On the first episode, we talked about what happens when your team isn't listening to each other. When your team is playing politics, to me, that's a little bit different. I had a leader once tell me that they believed that there was no such thing as an office or a team without politics. And what he meant by that was just in talking about the relationships that exist between people and the power structure that is involved, not by where the organization promotes people and assigns people job responsibilities and roles, but the power that we give each other in terms of the social and emotional relationships that we have within the office. And there will always be people who are known for this or known for that. There's the guy that does this, the girl that does this in the office, and that will always happen. And that person once said that was the definition of politics. And I don't think he's wrong, but in the context of this article, politics is clearly being defined as an always negative thing that kind of comes with a deep-seated feeling that things are being done unfairly, or that there's different rules for different people, or that people aren't being treated equally by their leaders or by their coworkers. So there's a lot more to it than just kind of like, ooh, how do I navigate these relationships? It can be a serious problem on teams when it rises to the negative level.
Yeah, I think there's absolutely my belief as well that like the politics exist everywhere, because really what you're talking about is like the relationships that you have with individuals, and then as those relationships mature across multiple individuals, you're going to have people that see the world and see the work similarly, and you're going to have people that see the world and see the work in different ways. And because of that, you're going to have these natural kind of spaces that people will play within, where they start to think about like how they would do the work, how they would lead the work, what's the right way to make things happen, what's the right way, or in their own mind to be able to accomplish the task that's at hand. And the reality is that like over time, if you don't address those things when you see them, if you don't talk constantly about the value of seeing the work differently, of seeing the world differently, if you allow those teams to either divide themselves because of maybe competition, or if you have teams that work in a way where this team has to accomplish this before this team can do that, before this team can do that, then you also have that feeling of like, well, it's we always do it the right way, they do it the wrong way. Or if you have teams where somebody's responsible for getting the work done, but somebody's responsible differently for the budget, and then they kind of collide a little bit. Like these things naturally are going to happen within your teams when you have multiple people working together. I think to your point, though, the kicker is that it becomes that negative politics when it starts to have an impact on either like the productivity of what everybody's working on, and or there starts to be a really kind of negative feeling about the relationships amongst the different groups within the team, and or it becomes like I guess the way to test it immediately is like somebody new comes in, right? Like what does that look like? Are teams talking positive about the other teams? Are teams kind of saying like, hey, if you do this work, you got to come over here, or we're the ones who see it this way, or they're the ones who see it. You know what I mean? Like that's really the best time to understand like where the politics are within your teams, is like what happens with the new person and how do they perceive things, and how are they welcomed, or how are they kind of almost asked immediately to figure out, how they want to do the work and which type of group they should be with. And like that to me is where When the politics become very negative, these are some of the things that you see when that happens.
Yeah, I agree. But on the same token, I've seen that kind of thing happen where it is all in good fun and there is no negativity. This whole like kind of pick a side thing, almost like a fan of a sports team versus another sports team. Like, oh, if you might you get invited over to a Super Bowl party and you don't inherently like one team or the other, you're just into it for a good game, and you get there and half the people there are wearing one jersey and half the people there are wearing another jersey, and they're all looking at you like, all right, Lorenzo, what side are you on? You're not about to be kicked out of the party. It's all in good fun. Like there are examples of what you're talking about where it can be kind of like almost like a way of welcoming somebody to a team is a way to judge. You put them in a situation where you are asking them to take a side, and you're trying to see whether or not they want to be one of you. It's a test. It's a test to see, does this person want to assimilate into our group culture, whatever that is. And that isn't inherently a problem as long as the group culture is one of welcoming and acceptance and one where the in versus out is not based on anything that a person can't control, but based on like, oh, what music do you like, or what kind of this do you like? Those kind of things can be a way to form camaraderie and bonds between people. But again, it's a very fine line, and it can go off the deep end into a negative area if it's not done right or if it's left unchecked. When I think about playing politics going into the negative, there are kind of two examples I can think of where kind of like the same things happening. One would result in not a problem, whereas in another situation it would result in a problem. One is if the person who is supposedly playing politics is in a position of power. So it's one thing to have politics between people on a team who are peers. It's another thing when the perception is that the leader is playing politics. Because if I'm not the leader and I think my leader is playing politics, well, now that person is playing a game that I can't compete in because they have power over my role, maybe my annual review. If I'm feeling like I have to do things differently because of almost trying to manage the emotional or political expectations of the leader as opposed to just managing my job description and what's expected of me by the organization, that is a problem when it's happening by the leader. And then the second is, we all know the difference between the person in high school who had a lot of power because they were the bully, and the person who had a lot of power in high school because the people there gave them that power. Like they might have been like a jock or like the head cheerleader, but they were so nice. They just were, they wanted to be nice to everybody. They wanted to be friends with everybody. And they just had that gravitational pull that some people have. And that power is given to them by people, which means it can be taken by people. And those situations are ones that can be difficult because I think in a lot of organizations, if you have somebody like that on a team who just kind of has this natural gravitational pull because of how kind they are and how accepting they are and how well they treat other people, there can be an inherent kind of negative belief from others that person almost has something that they don't have. Like what? Like I want to be the person who has that, but I don't know how to do that. I can't do that. I can't compete. And if I can't compete, now therefore that person is, it's a negative element on the team that person is here with that power that we've all granted them because I haven't granted them that power. I haven't decided to do that. It's the other people on the team who have, and now I feel like I'm having to play subordinate to this person who doesn't have a title, but who now has this kind of political power granted to them by the team.
Yeah, well, I think what you just said there's like that's the difference between like power and politics. Is like,
right.
It's not that they have the power. It's what do they do with it? And are they either opening the door for others? Are they using that to bring people along? Are they using that to create spaces for people to feel heard and seen and welcome? So again, like I think in to your earlier example about like kind of picking a side from a positive standpoint, like from a jersey, for me, that's still something that I would be conscious of because there should also be an option of like, you don't even have to wear a jersey. Like if you're truly talking about like inclusive, non-political picking a side type of thing, it's like you you should just be welcome to go to the party.
Right.
And then the choice is yours. The minute that a team says you should make a choice or you need to make a choice, again, like that's when you're starting to see some of that behavior that again can be done in a positive way, but more than likely the whole idea is like, but on behalf of everybody here, what you choose to do, how you choose to represent, which jersey you want to wear or not wear, whatever, like that's totally fine. We welcome all. So like that's where I think seeing those things is helpful when you're thinking about the game of the politics. And then to your point about the kind of the authority or the power structure element, when I hear like leaders playing politics, I immediately think of two things. Number one, it's that they're not being truthful and authentic about what's going on or what the strategies are or why we have to do things. Because I immediately like they're being a politician.
Yeah.
Like they're just telling you what they think you want to hear.
It's spin.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
They're using the information to try to get what they want in a way of like doling it out in the right way.
Totally. And it's inauthentic and people can see through it. So I think if leaders are doing politics, that's what number one that I see. Number two then is favoritism. That's the other part of leadership politics, which is it's clear that this leader likes either this team or this individual or this way of working, and they lean strategies towards that style or that way. And then it's kind of like, so again, like that's kind of what I see from a leadership politics standpoint. When it comes to the teams back and forth, I think that's where, as a leader, when you see that, there is some elements where you do want teams to have a certain kind of like, I don't know, it may be excitement or pride for the work that team is doing. You do want some of that to happen. What you have to be really conscious of is celebrating even more so when you see those teams work together, bring each other in, make an adjustment based upon the perspective of somebody else. Like when you see the things that create real great collaboration and a greater sense of team, you really have to celebrate those things to bring down, I think, the levels of politics that, again, are always going to exist, but put them in a space where they're not leading the larger team into a negative space, or they're not creating a lack of productivity. They're not creating a space where people don't feel welcome or included in the work that your larger team is doing.
Right, for sure. Back to the first thing you were saying around, like the jersey example. You're right. It's only choice if the choices aren't defined for you. It's the illusion of choice if someone's saying to you, "Oh, Lorenzo, the choice is totally yours between A and B." Well, the choice could be it's only really your choice if the choice is between A, B, C, and 14, right? Like you get to define the choices if the choice is truly yours, which is again, not participating at all if you don't want to, if it's just not something that you feel like you need to pick a side on, or that you feel truly, passionate about. When it comes to, the leadership kind of responsibility in this, I think this is where the rubber meets the road on this conversation, because on the one hand, we agree that there's a certain element of this that can be positive on a team in terms of the camaraderie that exists if it's an inclusive environment, if it's kind of wielded the right way. But it can very quickly derail into the negative, even though the intent wasn't to do so. Like the intent could be totally positive, but it goes into the negative if it's kind of left unchecked. And I think you're right. The only way for a leader to effectively do this without stamping out the good things, right? Like it's like when my 5-year-old is, going to change the world someday, but right now she's driving me crazy, right? And I could make it so she doesn't drive me crazy, but then she won't change the world someday. We all know that kind of conundrum as a parent that we deal with. I think it's the same thing. I think when a leader is looking at the positive elements of this on a team that bring a team together, you can make it so it never turns negative from a political standpoint by just stamping out that behavior altogether. but then you've lost some of the positive that can come from when a team is truly cohesive and high performing and working together. And so as a leader, how do you do this? How do you allow this to happen? How do you allow it to kind of people to have the leeway to see what can be done when a team truly cares about each other, when a team is inclusive, when they bring each other along, without, while also having kind of like the spidey sense feelers up for looking for certain elements that might make you go, okay, that didn't feel right. I'm not going to jump in yet, but I need to keep my eye on this, because if I see it happen again, then that means it wasn't a fluke and I need to address it right away. Like there's those elements that have to happen. And I think that's important to discuss. Like what do leaders look for, and what rises to the level of, all right, we can't do this.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, here's what I want you to do. If you're a leader of people or a leader of leaders, and you're trying to kind of keep your eyes open and your ears open for things that rise to the level of you feeling like, okay, you know what, this camaraderie, this kind of team element, this positivity that I'm seeing on the team, it possibly is rising to the level of politics in a negative way. What you should be looking for are things that I kind of liken to the field goal kicker losing the game, kind of situation. When we all know that situation of the field goal kicker that loses the game because they didn't make that last field goal in the closing seconds of the game, and everybody blames that kicker. But if we are being perfectly honest here, there were hundreds of other things that happened in that game that caused that team to lose, even though in that moment we think about it as, oh, it's all on the hands of this one person. When you see this on your team, what that looks like is, the team is getting together and they start to shirk responsibility of what they can't get done because of somebody else that's on the outside. So, we would have made our sales targets if the marketing materials were good. We would have made our sales targets if, something else, some other element of a person or a team that's on the outside that can be scapegoated or blamed for the issues that are that are happening on the team, as opposed to the team members actually taking ownership of it and thinking about the things they can do to solve the problem, even if it means getting involved. It's like, okay, maybe the marketing materials aren't good, but there's a difference between we would have made our targets, but the marketing materials suck, or we would have made our targets. Next month, we'll do a better job of partnering with the marketing team to make sure they understand our needs, so that the materials that come out are better suited to what our customers are looking for, as opposed to it's the ownership. Is the power that we have, are we using it to take ownership of our problems, or are we using it to shirk the problems onto somebody else so that we don't have to, so that we can avoid responsibility for the things that we need to take care of? And it's those kind of elements you have to look for as a leader when you're deciding whether or not what's happening or the discussion is rising to the level that you need to kind of jump in and stamp something down, or if it's a kind of a healthy element on the team.
Yeah, and again, it's going to happen.
Right.
It's going to happen quite frequently and very often. And, having people feel certain ways about each other, or teams versus teams, or like it's human nature. There's elements to it. People, especially on teams where people want to be successful, they're measuring their own work. They're measuring it sometimes as a collective of the larger work, but like, you're going to have these moments. And I think, to your point, as a leader, it's just being conscious and listening for it and seeing it. And like, when is it becoming too much? When have we moved on from saying like, hey, we own this, we can work on this, here's our strategies, here's where we have maybe some hurdles or some bumps in the road, versus we can't do this because of this person. We can't get this done because of this team. If like it's when all of the solutions turn into other people or other teams, that's when you kind of have to get you have to move to action as a leader and go have some influence and have some conversations and dig through it. But this is like, a lot of this can also be, somewhat minimized by, again, having the right peoples in the rooms, to having conversations where you're creating space for collaboration, talking through things when they come up, between individuals sometimes, or when you see that there's a kind of an initial rub that's going on. If you just give it to the team and say, you guys figure it out and get back to me when it's done, like, that's not helpful, right?
Right.
Like these are things that as a leader you have to catch on to and make adjustments to and address in the moment, to let the team know collectively, like, we're not going to do this to each other, and we're not going to We all have different layers and different elements of responsibility to get the work done, but we have to work together to make sure that it's done the right way and the best way possible.
Right. If I go back to the example about the sales targets not being hit because of the marketing team, think about it in the context of what you were saying, Lorenzo, on having the right people in the room. What if on every sales meeting there were 2 or 3 people from the marketing team in the meeting there? I would venture a guess to say that under those circumstances, the people on the sales team who didn't make sales targets are far less likely to say, we would have hit these sales targets if it weren't for the marketing team. It's a lot easier to scapegoat it when they are a they, them, not part of our team. They're the outsider. They're kind of nameless and faceless. It's an entity more so than a person. Get those people in the room with you, and they become people with names and faces and families and goals and shared interests. You're far less likely to find people scapegoating those people later when they're not in the room. I mean, I guess there's some examples, but very few. It's when you join people together like that and you create that kind of that welcoming environment where everybody who has a stake in the game for the outcome is kind of in the room when it's happening, it's far less likely that you will see one of those parts of it being scapegoated as the problem or the reason why the problem can't get solved later on down the road. So yes, get the right people in the room, get the people in the room that matter for making those decisions, and you can kind of stop this from happening even before it begins.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.